Today I'm going to be showing you how to crochet this absolutely beautiful join. This is the tight join as you go method. It is a little bit fiddly. It takes a little bit longer than most joins, but the beautiful corded little join that you get, I think, is absolutely worth the little bit extra time and effort that this join takes. It is the most secure way of joining as you go, and the back of your work will be completely flat. So we're flat on the back, and we have this beautiful delicate little cord running down the front. You can use any stitch to work this join. The only thing that matters is that your stitch counts on your squares are the same. It's quite simple once we get going, so let's leap straight on in. For the tight join as you go, the first square of your blanket you will make in its entirety, completed, ends woven in, ready to join. Then for the next square, you want to make your square up until the final round. Now this square can have any stitches along the outside as long as you have the same amount of chains. So for my squares, that's 2 in the corners. You can adapt this if you have 3 chains, if you have 1 chain, as long as the squares that you're making match stitch count wise. So you want to have the same amount of chains in the corner, and you want to have the same amount of stitches down the side. For me, on all these squares that I'm joining, I have 19 stitches on the side. The stitch type doesn't matter, the stitch count does. So this square here, my big daisy square, these are half double crochets on the last round. The square I want to join has single crochets. Now I've started the final round, I have worked 1 full side, and I have completed half of a corner. So I have my 2 single crochets for the corner, and I haven't chained anything yet. So I want to join along this side to this square. So this would be the second square of my blanket for the very first row. I'm always going to join to this side and keep going. So I have my 2 stitches for my first half of my corner. I'm working with 2 chains, so I'm going to go ahead, chain 1. I'm going to lift that loop up and off my hook, and I'm going to insert it into the chain 2 space of the square I want to join to. Then I'm going to pop that loop back on my hook, draw it through the chain space, and then chain 1. So I've created my 2 chains for my corner, and I have also joined to the corner space of the square I'm joining to. Now work your next stitch. For me, it's a single crochet. For you, it could be a half double crochet, a double crochet, whatever the stitch. Work your next stitch. Then pull up a loop, take your hook out, find the first stitch of the square you're joining to, and put your hook underneath it. Then put the loop back on your hook, pull it tight, and pull it through the stitch of the square you're joining to. Then you create your next stitch on the square you're working on, and do the exact same thing again. Pull up a loop, take out your hook, insert it into the next stitch of the square you're joining to, put the loop back on your hook, pull it down tight, and pull it through that stitch. We're going to do this for every stitch. Make your stitch on the square you're making, pull up a loop, take your hook out, insert your hook into the next stitch of the square you're joining to, and put that loop back on your hook. Pull it down tight and pull it through the stitch. Then create your next stitch. Loop up, hook out into the next stitch of the square you're joining to, loop back on your hook, pull it down nice and snug, and pull it through the stitch of the square you're joining to. You can see it creates this really pretty little corded braid effect. We're going to keep doing this for every stitch. Make your stitch, pull up a loop, take out your hook, put your hook under the stitch of the square you're joining to, put the loop back on your hook, pull it down tight and pull it through the stitch. Then move on and make your next stitch. Make the stitch, pull up a loop, take out your hook, hook into the stitch of the square you're joining to, loop back on your hook, pull it snug, pull it through, and move on to your next stitch. It takes a little bit of getting used to and a little bit of concentration. It's really easy to forget to pull it through the stitch before you make your next one. But after a while, you get into a rhythm of joining and it becomes vastly easier. The more you do it, the less you need to concentrate. So keep working your way up the side, joining all your stitches. Create your stitch. Lift up a loop. Take out your hook. Pop it under the next stitch of the square you're joining to and pull that loop snug back onto your hook. Pull it through the stitch. Joined. Make your next stitch. Pull up a loop. Pull out your hook. Pop it into the square you're joining. Pull that back down. Pull it through. Joined. Keep going until you have run out of stitches to join to. When you reach your corner chain 2 space, or however many chains you have, don't worry, you still have 2 more stitches to make and you'll still have 2 more stitches to attach to on your other square. So we're going to be attaching this half of the corner as well. That is my final stitch attached, and I've pulled it through the final stitch. So that's all 19 stitches joined. These are half double crochets and I've joined them with a single crochet. So you can see it doesn't matter which stitch you're using. You can combine the stitches absolutely fine, but you have to have the same number of stitches for each square. Then once you have finished joining your very final stitch and you've pulled it through the stitch of the square you're joining to and you're at the corner, chain 1 for the first chain of the corner, lift your loop up, out, go into the chain space of the square you're joining to, pop it back onto your hook, draw it through just as if we were joining with the stitches, then chain 1 to complete the 2 chains of the corner, then finish the actual corner of the square you're crocheting. Fully joined and the back is completely flat. It's a really secure join. Then you can go ahead and finish crocheting your square. All subsequent squares along the first row will be joined exactly the same way, joining to the next side. Keep working your way all the way along until you are ready to begin your second row. Now for your second row, I find it helpful to actually turn your entire blanket 180 degrees. So what was the bottom now becomes the top. So the first square of the next row, we're going to do exactly the same thing again. We're going to complete the first side of that square and however many stitches in your corner you have before you start your chaining. Then, because I'm working with 2 chains, I'm going to chain 1, lift that loop up and take my hook out, and I'm going to be working diagonally into the next square across. So this is square 1, square 2, you'll have square 3, 4, however long your first row is. You want to work diagonally across for joining into the next square. So I'm going to pick up this yellow square and I'm going to put my hook in to the chain space of that square, put my loop back on my hook, draw it through the chain space, and then chain 1. So I have joined diagonally. Then I'm going to work my 19 stitches, or however many stitches you have to work, exactly the same way as we joined along the side on the very first row. Exactly the same process. So I make my stitch. We're going to join along the side of that first square, exactly the same way as we were joining in the first row. We're going to do the same for this second row. When you're joining just one edge, it's always the same. So you've made your first stitch, pull up the loop, and then you want to find the right stitch to work into. So what you want to look out for is that you don't inadvertently work into a chain, and the best way to do that is to count your stitches. If you're at all concerned that you can't identify which is a stitch and which is the chain, count your actual stitches on the square you want to join to. I know I have 19 stitches, so for me that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So I know this is my 19th stitch. So you can see it looks a lot like the chain and there's a tiny little gap I could work into. But this is the 19th stitch and this is the one I want to join to. So pop your loop on your hook, pull it down, draw it through that stitch, and then continue joining just as you did for all the sides on that first row. Then once you have joined your very last stitch of this square, chain 1, lift your hook up, pull up a loop, hook into the chain space of the square we're joining to, put that loop back on your hook, pull it through and chain 1. So we have joined exactly the same way as you were joining along the first row. Then you can complete your square as normal. So as you have worked around and finished your square, you naturally will have turned your blanket back to face you. So we have the first row along here, and this is how you will attach the first square of every new row. So this is row 2. You'll do exactly the same for row 3, row 4, row 5. The first square of every new row is attached the same way. Now the next square in your row, And for every other next square, you will have 2 sides to join to. So we are always going to, after the first square of every new row, your next square will have 2 sides to join to. So again, I advise turning your work all the way around, just so it's a bit easier to work on. And then obviously as you finish crocheting your square, you'll come back round again. So my smiley face is upside down, facing the bottom of the blanket. Now, just as before, I've started my square, I've done one complete side, and I have stopped with the last stitch of the corner before any chains. Now on your blanket, you will have more squares running along the bottom that you will have attached. So you will always have in the middle of the blanket a diagonal to attach to. So just as you did with this very first square reaching into the diagonal of the next square of the row of your blanket, you would do exactly the same for the middle squares. So if you have a square over here, when you're creating this middle square, so my smiley face is in my blanket, I'm working in the middle of my blanket. If there's another square, reach diagonally across and join it exactly in the same way that you did with the first square. If, however, you have reached the outside edge of your blanket, and for this, we're going to pretend that I have. So this is also how you would deal with the outside edge. If there are no more squares on your blanket to join diagonally, then we are going to join directly to the square below. You always want to have your corners attached. So in the middle of the blanket, when there is another square, join diagonally. If you've reached the outside edge and there is no other square, join straight down to the square we're joining to. So I'm going to chain 1 to begin my corner. I'm going to either join diagonally if there is another square here, or if not, I'm going to join directly to the square below and into this chain space just as before. Take that loop up, take your hook out, insert it into the chain space, draw it back down and pull it through the chain space. Then chain 1 to complete your 2 chains for your corner. Then, just as we were doing, we're going to join all the stitches along the side. So you create your stitch, lift up the loop, pull it out, put it into the stitch on the square you're joining to, put the loop back on your hook, pull it through, first stitch joined. Keep going until you run out of stitches to attach to and you're at the chains. So I have just joined the last stitch along this row. And now for this middle section, you're going to chain 1 and lift up a loop and take it off your hook. Now for all these squares that we're joining to, they have been joined diagonally. If this one was to go to another square, it would have been joined diagonally. If there was another square, again, you would join diagonally. So because when we work in this direction, we join diagonally wherever there is another square to join to, when coming back the other way, we want to pick up in the diagonal this opposite square. So this red one here was joined to the yellow. So now we want to join across diagonally to the green. So this is where it gets a little bit tight and fiddly. I'm going to put my hook in to the green because I'm doing a diagonal join. And under here, I want to try and get this loop back onto my hook. Then pull it through, carefully does it, the green. You might want to give yourself a little bit more slack. So I've just lifted that up a little bit higher. And then finish your second chain for your corner. So it's diagonally and we're working over that joint. So we've got a little crisscross. Then we need to join along this side, working up. So if I bring my blanket right way round, you can see we've come along the bottom. We've joined diagonally and now we want to come back up this second side. So we're going to do that exactly the same way as we have done all these other joins. Work your stitch, lift up your loop, find the corresponding stitch on the side you're joining to, pull it through, and then continue working. Keep going until you have run out of stitches to work and you are about to start the chains for your corner. So that is my final stitch joined, and we're going to tackle the corners just as we have on this first row. We're going to chain one, loop up, out, into the chain space of the square you're joining to, put that loop back on your hook, draw it through, and chain one. Then complete the rest of your square because the joining is now finished. So that is how you will join every square when you have two sides to join. For all subsequent rows, you're going to repeat exactly the same thing. So we have the first starting square, which will always just be joined on one side. And then all subsequent squares in that row will be joined on two. If you meet a point when you're doing a square and you've got another square to join it to, so here's another one in my bottom row, and I'm joining and I have a square to join to, join diagonally. If you've reached the outside edge and you don't have any more squares to join diagonally to, just join straight down. Then when you come back to finish up your square, you join diagonally again. So in the middle, you will have these little crisscross joins, and at the edges, you will have nice, secure, straight down joins, top and bottom of your blanket. The back of your blanket will be completely flat. You can't see your joins on the back. And the front will have this incredibly pretty, slightly raised, corded join. I absolutely adore how this join looks. Yes, it takes a little bit longer. Yes, it can be a fiddly pain in the behind. However, I do think the finished effect is just so pretty. It's worth the extra effort. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please do let me know what you think of this join down in the comments. And until next time, happy crocheting. Bye.